Welcome to the Live Up podcast, where we revisit the movies from our youth to see if they live up. Today, for our 20th episode, we're mixing up our format slightly. We typically review, discuss, and score the movie in question to see if it lives up to us as adults and whether it lives up to its intended audience, kids today. However, there were those movies that were decidedly not intended for kids, and you saw it as a kid at a sleepover, your friend had HBO, or your parents weren't paying attention, which, let's be honest, was most of the time.
These are all the movies we definitely did not see in the theater. These are slasher films that would keep you laying awake for months, or killer clown movies murdering people with cotton candy, or Christian Slater faking an orgasm on a pirate radio station. We knew we were not supposed to be watching these movies, but nobody came in to see what we were watching. So
today we decided to introduce a special type of Live Up episode. It's called Live Up After Dark, where we review and score the films just as we would normally, but these are ones that we specifically should not have watched during our childhood, but we did it anyway. Everything's still pretty much the same. The only point of difference will be our considerations for a kid's score, where we try to consider whether this would live up to younger folk who also inappropriately stumble into it. Perhaps less likely because you could see what your kids are watching on streaming these days versus popping a VHS out of the container there. But that's our slight tweak for reimagining this. And you know everybody did it. And even on this podcast, we've discovered movies that have been rated R or not appropriate for kid viewing, but we did it anyway. This one's an extreme case, though. I'm Jess Latimer.
And I'm Amanda Treat. For our very first Live Up After Dark episode, we're reviewing the movie that taught us all how to pair Chianti and fava beans.
Ew.
It's 1991's Silence of the Lambs. Jess, what is your earliest experience with Silence of the Lambs?
I 100% have a memory of watching this. My friend Cheryl Zakaria, we've lost touch. Hi, Cheryl. What's going on? At her house, her dad had a really big Laserdisc collection. And we should explain to young people what Laserdiscs are.
Whoa. Time out. Laserdisc.
Laserdisc. I'm not saying DVD. I am saying Laserdisc. No. Do you remember that? Did you?
I did, because my science teacher used to have one. When they wheeled the cart in, I don't know, it was some sort of sciencey themed program. But it was on Laserdisc.
Yeah.
And these things were like bigger than a record. Like They were the biggest flat circular shaped object you've ever seen in your life. And man, did this format die. It died very quickly.
I mean, it's so big. It's like bigger than like a Texas Bull cowboy hat. It was huge. And so at my friend's house, like her dad was super into it, and they had a big screen, and the entire wall was a huge collection of Laserdiscs. So he was a collector, which I kind of like think back and I feel sad for him now. So now he has all these Laserdiscs.
That is so sad. He invested in a technology that was on its way to failure. But I will sympathize with him because my dad had a Beta projector. Do you remember Beta?
Yeah, but Beta's high quality.
Beta was the rival to VHS cassettes. He had a Beta projector that we used to play on the ceiling.
That might be worth something.
On the ceiling. No, it's not. It really, really is not.
Well, so Laserdiscs, for folks who don't know, Laserdiscs were predated DVDs. So they were sort of around the same time as VHS, and they were considered high-end quality. I don't even know. They're sort of a precursor to DVD, but I'm losing the thread here. Anyway, at her house, there was definitely a Silence of the Lambs Laserdisc that we popped in and watched. And we definitely watched it multiple times at her house. I could not have been more than 12. I was definitely in middle school. I might have been 11. And I know this movie came out in 91. So yeah, it sort of tracks. I was like 11 or 12. And this movie was also on cable. So I definitely watched this with my brother on TV, edited, because watching it now as an adult, I remember some of the dubbing, and I remember that some of the nudity was edited out of the, murder, blood, fine. But some of the nudity and the cursing. So I watched this movie in an inappropriate amount of times. Like, I still remember the dialogue when I watched it again. I don't know what that says about me.
I'm just really hung up on the fact that you watch this on Laserdisc. I want to get you a trophy that says, I watched Silence of the Lambs on Laserdisc, and like a big bowling trophy size award that you can display somewhere in your house. So guests come in and go, what? There
might be other movies on this podcast where I've seen on Laserdisc, but this one I
seen
remember
on Laserdisc.
specifically.
How many movies? Oh, man, we're going to have to talk about this another time, but I'm fascinated by how many movies you've seen on Laserdisc. That's a thing. That is a thing.
It is a thing. I'm going to have to reach out to Cheryl on the socials to be like, do you remember what I should have done this before this podcast? But I should be like, do you remember watching this movie on Laserdisc? She'll be like, what are you
Hello,
talking
darkness,
about?
old friend.
Yes. Like, oh my God.
I remember your Laserdisc player prominently, and I haven't bothered to reach out until now.
But I'm reaching out now specifically to ask about your dad's Laserdisc collection.
I was thinking about Silence of the Lambs on Laserdisc, and I thought of you. That's what everybody wants to hear at this point.
Oh man! So that's what I remember, and I remember. I don't even think when I watched it, I thought it was that inappropriate. It was just like I guess now I realize we shouldn't have been watching that movie, but it didn't even register as something like illicit that we were doing.
Well, we can actually talk about the content of this in a little bit, because I was reading that when it came out in England, that they have their separate rating system, but that it was rated like you must be over 18 to watch this. But in the years since it came out, they downgraded it to you must be over 15.
Oh, interesting.
This. And I think the reason for that is when you watch it carefully, they don't actually show any of the violence.
You know, they really
cut
don't.
Away.
It's like
cut
Jaws.
away from every single moment where something bad's about to happen, and it's left to your imagination to fill in the blanks, which is possibly worse.
It's definitely
it's kind of worse.
Totally.
But they don't show any of it, which is fascinating. And I didn't because your memory filled in all the blanks, so I don't remember it not being violent, but it's not actually that violent.
Yeah, no, it's not, but it's sort of psychologically terrifying. One note with watching it again, obviously, listeners, I did not watch this with my kids because that would be insane bad decision.
Nope.
Did not.
Your wife Elena would have had some strong words for you if you tried that.
This is not one of those, hey, honey, did you check the rating? Like, we all know that Silence of the Lambs.
We know. This is not PG.
But the funny thing is that, you know, she checked in as I was starting to watch it on the couch, and she checked in and she was like, oh yeah, I kind of, she's only seen this once, and I think with me in college. Wow. And she was like, oh yeah, I think this is too dark for me. So, but she kind of watched for a little bit, you know, because Jodie Foster, of course. And then she was like, wow, this is really dark. And I'm like, yeah, you know, and the escape scene at the end, I'm looking forward to rewatching that. And she goes, he escapes? She like totally forgot that Hannibal Lecter escapes in the end. And she was horrified. And then she like...
Yeah, well, it's awesome.
It is awesome. But then she very quickly exited the room to go watch Sex Education in the basement. And she was like, I'm out of here. I'm not watching this.
Oh, sorry, Elena.
Yeah. But what about you, Amanda? Did you watch it on Laserdisc?
No, I would bet anything that my parents rented a VHS cassette copy of this from Blockbuster and then left that VHS cassette sitting around the house, and that's how I watched it.
That's also crazy, though, in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, just that your
just leaving
parents
it laying
would leave
around.
a movie sitting there, and it was like, oh, what are you doing after Golden Girls? Well, Amanda's in the other room watching something.
Well, that's fine. They're probably
Should we
watching
check on
Rudolph
her?
again.
Nah, yeah, like the kids are fine. Yeah, I will say that whatever that first viewing was, I was probably 12 years old, and that I rewatched it at least a few times, but at one point with all of my younger siblings, including my youngest sister, who I recall was 4 years old at the time. God. And she didn't really follow along with what was going on, so like she wasn't scared of it at all. But I just want to call out, that's what happens when you leave your oldest kids in charge of the youngest kids. Like,
cannot believe that. 4.
There you go. Yeah, she was. My youngest sister Lydia saw it at age 4, but didn't think twice about it. She was very scared of the Michael Jackson Thriller video, but she really didn't blink at this movie at any point. It was just like, whatever. Adults be adulting over here. But I was very conscious of what was going on with this movie when I saw it at 12, because I recalled the first ever Oscar award ceremony ceremony that I sat all the way through was that year, and I was really pulling for Beauty and the Beast, which we reviewed on a previous episode. I was a huge fan of that, and this is the movie that beat it for Best Picture. And like, I viscerally remember watching that Oscars because they rolled Billy Crystal onto the stage dressed as Hannibal Lecter with the mask over his face, and he was on a dolly, and it was like super funny. But at the same time, kid me's like, yeah, go Beauty and the Beast. And when it lost, I think by the time I swiped this VHS cassette and watched it, I was probably spite watching it, you know, like
this is what beat my favorite movie.
How dare you beat Beauty and the Beast? But then like a few minutes in, it's like, whoa.
What did I just do?
I'm way over my head on this one. Oh, and I remember being super scared, right? Even from the moment Clarice, we'll talk about all these scenes in a moment, but like early on, she's given a tip to go check out a storage warehouse.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
she
scary.
Cranks up the garage door and slips under in the pitch black, and like even gives the guy who owns the place like a card, like, if the door slams shut and traps me in here, please call my boss.
Oh my god.
And she's in there in the pitch black darkness with a flashlight and finds a human head in a jar. And like 12-year-old me was at that point like, nope. Like so many things. No.
That scene is like particularly, it's almost like worse than walking downstairs into a creepy basement or something. It was
which she does repeatedly in this movie.
Which she does repeatedly in this movie, but that struck me too as a kid. That scared me when she has to slide under the storage facility, the storage thing to get in there. I was like, this is terrifying me.
No, we were still at the age where, like, going down into a pitch black basement or going into a pitch black garage was friggin' terrifying. So watching her do it,
it's not even a scary part of this movie, but it resonated as scary to me.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not. Although she does find a human head in a jar.
Yeah, that's true.
So that is, yeah. So I was way over my head watching this at age 12. But hey, it's after dark.
No, it's interesting though, because we talked about this in our Beauty and the Beast episode, that was the first movie that I remember seeing before the Oscars, and I remember it being nominated, and I thought that was really cool. And I forgot that this was the movie that it lost to. Oh my god.
Yeah, they're a little different.
Just a little.
Although, you know, there is a beauty and there is a beast in this too.
I was just about to say, I mean, there's still an interesting dynamic here between someone who's fucked up and the female lead. So,
you know, the songs just aren't as good here.
I mean, somebody could write the song "Something There That Wasn't There Before" about trying to solve this case, and it could be pretty fun.
Oh, it's a human head in a jar. There's something there that wasn't there before.
And here's a butterfly.
It's a head with a moth down its throat.
Oh. And the birds tweet.
Yeah, no.
This is a horrible remake.
Clarice is spinning and there's like a flock of starlings. Yeah, oh god. All right. Anyway, Jess, do you want to give an actual plot summary of Silence of the Lambs? Because
sure.
We're making this sound completely off the rails. It is off the rails, but
yeah, this is
good luck.
This is a slow burn psychological thriller. It's the first time as a tween that people our age learned about serial killers and just how captivating they could be.
Some of us had an after dark experience with Freddy Krueger prior to this movie.
Oh, that's a good point.
I just want to call out, there's worse serial killers out there, but that also they were like stupid. And this is a smart, clever,
it is
scary.
That is a good point. So I think that this is an entryway for people our age into serial killers could be captivating and not dumb.
He's so captivating.
So captivating. And then you have the novice FBI agent tasked with getting a jailed serial killer, i.e. Hannibal Lecter, / psychiatrist, to help in a current hunt for Buffalo Bill, who is also a serial killer who skins his victims. So, you know, very light stuff here in terms of what the plot is. And I'd say the sneaky plot here is that it's kind of a movie about a woman trying to succeed in a man's world. And there are themes of that here that were new to me watching as an adult.
Oh, hell yes it is. And I didn't remember this as strongly. We've been watching so many movies recently where you have Sigourney Weaver and Ghostbusters making her character, Dana, super strong, but just surrounded by what we were calling garbage men.
Total.
Clarice has it even worse. It's every guy she encounters seems to have some sort of attempt at either picking her up, hitting on her, or this power dynamic that is just icky. I feel like she set such a beautiful example for how to stick up for yourself in this world without getting completely kicked out of it. And yeah, let's dive right into her. I mean, she's such a strong character. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, she's great. Shall we talk about Clarice?
Before we get to Clarice and Dr. Lecter and all of the fantastic characters in this movie, I just want to talk real quick about how this movie came to fruition. So this was directed by Jonathan Demme, who, leading up to this, always did either prison exploitation movies from the 70s, or he did a bunch of rom-coms. Then, boom, did Silence of the Lambs.
That's crazy.
So it was just such a 180 from the path he was on. But I watched an interview with him, and he was just like, yeah, I was just, like, waiting to do a thriller, dying to do a thriller, and, like, just kept getting handed rom-coms. Way to knock it out of the park for something you've never done before. Like, this is so good. His other movies, like, you know, Married to the Mob, it's a good movie, but it's not a Silence of the Lambs good movie. And then he went on from this to do Philadelphia and The Manchurian Candidate, Beloved, Rachel Getting Married. Like, he went in a very serious direction.
Those are all good movies that you listed there.
They are. I don't know. I just find this trajectory amazing.
I feel like these days, if you have that caliber of talent in a movie, you would not give this to someone who's never done something like it before.
Right. And the studio was like, oh, he's done a bunch of like fun movies that made us a lot of money. Let's give him the Silence of the Lambs and good luck.
Yeah, because at this point, Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster were very well established. She had already won an Oscar, so
she already had, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's still so young here, but she actually had to not plead with him, but like go make her case for being Clarice.
Really?
Because he was trying to cast Michelle Pfeiffer that he had just worked with on Married to the Mob, and when she passed on it, he tried to get Meg Ryan.
No.
Can you imagine Meg Ryan as Clarice?
We wouldn't even be talking about
any of the gravitas. Right
now.
No, it would have been completely different.
No offense, Meg Ryan.
She was America's sweetheart and adorable, but like the gravitas would not have been the same. Like, you needed Jodie Foster, who, when she went to him and she said, hey, I have literal stalkers and I have literal FBI agents assigned to like my security detail, and I have so much respect for them. I want this role. And that sold him on it. Like, oh, okay, Jodie Foster's a little young and known for all this other stuff, but okay, let's give her a shot. Like, not a shot. She's an Oscar winner.
Well, she was already... Yeah, that surprises me that she had to advocate for it, because she already had taken on interesting roles at this point.
So she had that guy who shot Ronald Reagan on her behalf.
Hinckley.
Like, I'm trying to impress Jodie Foster. Like,
yeah.
And so immediately gets FBI security detail because she had all these other death threats from like creepy older men. But she had this other guy who, she was at Yale as a student performing in their theater scene, and he would like show up at her performances and like watch her. Yes, so many creepy things. So she was in this headspace of like, I really want to be the FBI agent who brings down a guy like this. Like, fuck these guys.
That's
and
interesting.
So that was
context,
her motive.
Because I didn't think about the fact that this is less than 10 years from when Reagan was shot.
When Reagan got shot, yeah.
And she's sort of involved. She's not involved, but she's
not involved, but she's a side victim of that.
Did Jonathan Demme win the Oscar? He must have, because this swept the Oscars, right?
This got the top 5. This was Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Actor, Best Actress, Jodie Foster. In a really good year, too. Like, this is the year that Rain Man came out. This was the Thelma and Louise year. Like,
and Beauty and the Beast.
So many good movies. And Beauty and the Beast, which was also Best Picture and didn't win. And, like, I'm trying to, be gracious about that now that I'm decades older than I was when I was 12 years old watching this. But, like, yeah. We should talk about Clarice,
we should.
Let's talk Jodie Foster's Clarice.
Let's do it. I loved her.
So, no, I mean, she's amazing. She encapsulates so many things, and like you don't get her immediately because the opening credit sequence is just her running through the woods,
which is, by the way, still scary. I mean, it
looks super scary. It's bleak. There's no leaves on the trees.
The score is really like, I'm
so
gonna keep
ominous.
calling it slow burn. It's very like something bad's about to happen that's gonna blow your eyeballs out. Yeah.
You see her running. She is wearing what is the most fantastic 1990s mock turtleneck under a sweatshirt, and I have so many tragic school photos taken in this similar outfit with a Champion sweatshirt with a mock turtleneck under it. Yeah, that was a look back in 1990.
I think it's still a look for soccer moms, maybe in certain parts of the country.
Nope. They don't make mock turtlenecks anymore. I swear, Land's End should declare bankruptcy. They've lost the mock turtleneck. It went away. It's gone.
Yeah, I was really, I've dressed like a couple of the characters, sort of, or I've been on theme the last couple episodes, and I'd say, I went for the sweatshirt here, but I don't own a mock turtleneck.
I was secretly hoping Jess would show up in a mock turtleneck.
Yeah, being a lesbian, there was a chance.
I don't know where you would find one at this point. Like,
special lesbian stores. I don't know.
I think they were all piled up and burned somewhere. Like, that was such a bad fashion item. Like, what was the point of a mock turtleneck? It only goes halfway up your neck. Just the worst fashion statement ever.
She still looks good in it.
We all had that. We were rocking the mock turtlenecks in 1990. You're just watching her run through the woods at Quantico. It's cool. It sets the mood.
Yeah, no, it definitely sets the mood. It's very subtle, but there's only other men running. Some of them turn around to check her out. She, as an actress, I think she's just a short person. So like her size differential with the other FBI agents are just, nothing is said, but it's just, you could see it. And I noticed it. Like, you really notice that she looks small. She's like one of the only women. And that sort of just sets it up. They don't really focus on it too much, but it's there.
It's very much there. Like, there's the shot of her getting into the elevator, and they made a point of making sure every guy in that elevator was 1.5 feet taller than she is.
And they're all super beefy. Like, they're all big, broad shoulders. Yeah.
You can't see their faces because it's just like the bottom of their necks and everything down, and she's just standing there like a little troll. It's adorable. It is. But yeah, no, very visually obvious that she is in a giant man's world. And like, that theme carries all the way through, because even when she goes to meet with director Crawford, they're both being very courteous, but like the power dynamics immediately established. He used to be her instructor, and she's going to yes sir him all the way through. Mm-hmm. And like, there's points where she's getting treated in a very sexist manner, and she'll call him out on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, and he corrects himself at a certain point too.
Yeah, there's a good scene. I know we're like skirting the main point of the whole movie, of the Hannibal Lecter part, but there's that point in the movie where they go to some podunk town in West Virginia, and Crawford, her boss, insists on meeting with the sheriff and his deputies, who of course are all men. He sort of whispers to him and indicates that it's not something to be discussed in front of a woman. He explains later, the woman being Clarice, Jodie Foster's character, and he explains later, I did that just to ingratiate myself because I know how these guys are. And
to get him out of the room, he said that. Yeah. Like, I was just trying to get him out of the room. But she calls him out on it. She says, you're still setting an example for how to treat me.
And it's subtle, and I think this is where the scripting is really good and the directing is really good, because this movie is not about a woman making her way in a man's world. They're just small, little, subtle things that are there that sort of adds to the tension of the main tension between her and Hannibal Lecter. And, obviously at the end when she catches Buffalo Bill, it just makes it that much more satisfying. So there's these like very subtle things that aren't really brought up that much. And I actually thought like her in a very quick scene defending herself was like really, when Crawford, when she calls him out on it, again, she says it, but they don't dwell on it. It doesn't become like, this is a woke movie now kind of thing. It's just said and they move on. And this is where I actually thought Crawford was an interesting character too. Like you kind of don't, he's not a sexist jerk. He is trying to support her. He recognizes her value. Like this isn't a dated movie where she's treated like a damsel in distress. It's just sort of subtly there, which I thought was so well done.
I saw that whole scene because just when she calls him out and says, you're setting the example, and he goes, pause, point taken.
Yeah.
You can see like he's learning from that moment, and that's really interesting, and you don't see a lot of that in movies like this ever.
Don't. Yeah.
And then at the very, very end, the final scene before the closing credits is Clarice's graduation from the FBI Academy. And he comes over to her and says, I don't love being at graduation ceremonies with cake, but, just wanted to say good job. And they focus in on the handshake between the two of them. And that's such a moment of, I respect you as my equal. Getting the respect of Director Crawford is an important moment for her. And so it's cool that they had that small thread going through the background of this movie.
Yeah. And again, it's not cheesy when it happens. Like you really buy into it as authentic. And I think this is where, like, in a subtle way, I was saying it's like a sneaky plot of the movie, because this is threaded throughout where she defends herself. She goes toe-to-toe with Hannibal Lecter. She has the balls to, walk into this situation where she realizes that last scene when she walks into Buffalo Bill's house is still the most intense movie scene, I think. I would put that in one of the most intense of all time, and it's incredible. Her character has still the balls to do that, even though she's really nervous. It's not some sort of great triumph for women that she does it. This is more of a realistic portrayal, I think, as how women even now kind of navigate through a man's world, if you will. You take your wins and you do all these things, but there are certain unspoken wins you take. I related to it in a way that I never saw as a kid, and this is also a moment where I do think, I know it's kind of weird to think like, some 12-year-old girl in 2023 watching this, but I do think that thread will be noticed by younger kids now, or younger kids, even by someone in their 20s who had never encountered this before. It could still resonate in a way that makes it a more enjoyable viewing. So I thought that was kind of incredible. I loved it.
Yeah. Clarice is like, she's popular, she's well liked, but she's also like one of the token females, and she gets called in by Crawford to do what he calls an errand.
Okay, but let's talk about that token female. That token female is definitely her girlfriend. 100% chance. I mean, maybe I was just projecting too much, and I should say I'm going to spend this whole podcast girl crushing on Jodie Foster, because of course I am. The whole time I'm like, Elena. I was like, do you remember this character? This character is 100% her girlfriend. Like, they're like in bathrobes together. I mean, this is making it sound like some weird rom-com that we're watching.
I mean, they're having an FBI slumber party at one point.
FBI slumber party. I'm like, they're of course dating, obviously. So that was my takeaway. It's major gay vibes between the two of them.
So like, whatever you want to make of it.
But let's get back to the real plot of this movie, other than the sneaky gay plot. Yeah. When Clarice goes on this errand and she meets Dr. Chilton.
Yes, Dr. Frederick Chilton.
Yeah. Again, you have the dynamic where not only is he hitting on her, not only is he dismissing her, whether it's because she's a woman or she's not quite an agent yet, any of those things. She smiles. She has to defer to him, but yet she's like, I'm here to do my job. And she's sort of, in her own subtle way, has to be like, get the fuck out of my way. Even when she isn't saying that.
She navigates that so well. Like, she has him walk her all the way down to where Dr. Lecter is, and then turns to him, because he's just been ranting about how much he hates this guy, and says, hey, if you guys don't get along, I think I'll have more success if I go in alone. And then he just snaps at her like, well, then why'd you drag me all the way down here? And she just very sweetly turns to him and is like, well, I'd be missing the like charming company, or something to that extent.
I would have missed the pleasure of your company. It's so perfect.
Yes, she disarms him right at that moment where he's about to like flip out and cut off her access, and it's such a good way to handle a really toxic guy. And we'll get into him later, because somehow with all of the murderers in this movie, he ends up being one of the bad guys.
That's so true. The non-serial killer villain. He's a bureaucrat villain.
He didn't kill anybody, but he's kind of the worst.
He is the worst. Yeah.
She navigates the situation with him really well, and then repeatedly has to deal with him and still navigates it really well. It's really, really smart. And she is such a strong character for that. And that is probably why Dr. Hannibal Lecter is like, hey, I'm finally intrigued by somebody. I will continue talking to this person instead of trying to kill them.
Yeah, it's a great setup, because, you've seen her kind of do the smile and nod thing. But then in her subsequent multiple scenes with Anthony Hopkins, I wouldn't say that she snaps into place to be kind of more playing three-dimensional chess with him. She sort of drops the deferential and is a little bit more real with him and authentic. You know, she's telling him about her past because obviously she has a goal here to get him to help her. So she's giving him a little bit to work with about herself personally. But I just thought it was so subtle in terms of how, you know, her character seems the same. She seems differential. She's dealing with like all this other annoying crap. But then when she gets to Hannibal Lecter, she's sort of, they're equals really in how they're talking. And it's really just so well done. There's so many close-ups of her face. I mean, they're doing these scenes where it's really tight and they're telling these stories and she's going back and forth between the Buffalo Bill case and, you know, her childhood being an orphan and then her memories, and it's all like intermingling together, all where you're just basically, her face is the whole screen and you just see all these subtleties going on. It is so captivating and well done, and I'm not sure how many other actors could pull that off, that much like at face screen time.
And here's what's special about this movie is that for the rapport and for the intimacy that's built up in all of those scenes where they're facing off against each other, they weren't actually face to face while shooting any of that.
Right.
Because
they're like
the camera is
camera.
so tight on her face that he is off in the dark somewhere feeding the response lines but not being recorded. And then when he's doing all of his scenes, she's off in the dark where he can't see her, so they can hold the camera tight on his face. They barely talked the entire time they were filming this.
It's incredible.
Which is super crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. We should talk about Dr. Hannibal Lecter.
We should.
She goes down into the basement of the Baltimore prison to visit. And just the anticipation of seeing him for the first time. Like, she's got to go down the stairs and through the gate, and the security guards
like
patting her on the back.
Hell.
Like, walking down the long hallway. There's guys screaming at her from other cells. And she arrives, and he's just standing there in the middle of the cell. Hello. Like, it's eerie and creepy. It's so good. And they don't cut away from anything. They make it take the real amount of time it would take her to walk that hallway. It is torture getting up to him.
I mean, this is where I think it's like the whole movie is like a slow burn, right? So, you know, it takes her forever to get to him, and his character and the way that Anthony Hopkins delivers his lines. He's not in a rush. He doesn't look violent, but you kind of like the violence is like oozing from him. I mean, and he talks softly. He talks slowly. It builds your anxiety. I mean, I had like anxiety when I saw him on camera for the first time. The first time I saw this movie as a kid, I was like, that man is terrifying. And I will just say, to this day, if I ever met Anthony Hopkins in person, I don't care if he's like in front of a velvet, like roped red carpet, I would turn and run the other way screaming. Like, he is so embodies this character to me. I cannot separate the two.
We've had this situation before, but I'm asking you because I bet you didn't read my notes.
I didn't.
How long, how much screen time did Hannibal Lecter have in The Silence of the Lambs, which was almost a full 2 hours?
Oh, wow. I know, because we talked about how Beetlejuice only had
Beetlejuice was only 17 minutes.
In terms of its imprint, it's sort of like how I thought Large Marge was basically half the movie of Pee Wee Herman. But this is even more so. I mean, I would say my takeaway is that he's like in 2/3 of the movie.
20 minutes.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
He has 20 minutes of extremely intense screen time.
He never runs. He never yells. He is very slow and purposeful with his movements. And that just makes it so much scarier. It's the whole, you don't see it. You don't see the violence. You don't see it.
But there's this whole elaborate scene of him escaping. And apparently there's no security cameras on him at all. But somehow he manages to kill one of the security guards and then like string him up like an archangel with this elaborate lighting. Like, how did he do that quickly? That looks like it requires levers and pulleys. And I mean,
yeah.
For all of his slow, deliberate movements, he really went over the top with this one shot to like spook the heck out of them. And it works. It's one of the freakiest shots in the film, but why? That doesn't seem like him.
Yeah, I guess it's a small plot hole.
It's a little too flamboyant, is what I'm saying, for Dr. Lecter. He's not an artist with his murders. He's just like... He's efficient, but like, how do you do that quickly? And can I get that ready for my Halloween display? Because it looks like it takes forever to set that up.
It does, but I think he is sort of an artist with his murders, because he eats them, he prepares them. Like, this sounds really gross as a serial killer. Like, I think there is an art that he thinks he's doing.
I feel like he savors.
He savors, yeah,
murders,
that's a good.
But like,
fava bean.
This was a flamboyant murder, and it doesn't seem in character for him. But I haven't read the book, so maybe it is characteristic of him.
But that escape scene, that was so intense, and yet he's not even present for a lot of it. This is just what's great about the filmmaking. But his character is present, where, just to remind folks, he basically slices the face off the second guard, he disposes of the guard's body down an elevator shaft, and then...
But dressed in his clothes,
right.
So it looks like he fell down the elevator shaft.
Exactly.
And he dresses himself as the guard.
He dresses himself as the guard with, like, this face on, and basically he makes his escape because they rush him into an ambulance, and then obviously he takes over the ambulance and da-da-da-da-da, and escapes that way. But the first time...
And they don't show any of the da-da-da-da-da.
Right,
that's why this movie's actually not that violent. Like, he does horrible things, and they don't show any.
Yeah, they're not showing him slice the face off. I mean, you see blood, but you don't actually see him stab anybody. And even when you're seeing him beat up the cop, essentially beat one of the cops to death, you're not really seeing it. You just see him swing the club around, and there's like blood splattering. But
blood spatters up on his shirt, yeah.
It does leave it to more of your imagination, and they don't show how he kills the crew of the ambulance. They don't show any of that. And I will say, the first time I saw this movie as a kid, I mean, that blew me away. I think I audibly screamed when he gets up out of the ambulance and takes his face off. I mean,
pulls that face off.
Crazy. And even though I know what happens, but like watching it again, I was like, this is just as good. This has just the...
It's still really good. Oh my God, so good.
It's so good. It's still intense. You still have this like anxious feeling watching it. It's very well done.
And I think this movie holds up more for not showing any of those scenes. They show the after effect, but it makes you fill in the blanks with your own mind. And it's kind of like that stuck in the middle with you scene from Reservoir Dogs, where they don't show... the guy cutting the prisoner's ear off, but you just know it's happening, and then they cut back to it after it's happened, and you're just like, and it's so traumatic, but you didn't see a thing.
It's like how you never see the shark in Jaws either. It's just, you just know it's there. I mean, you see it once at the end, but that's about it.
Oh, so creepy.
It is so creepy, and all his like psychological speak, the way when he wants to take down Clarice and makes fun of her cheap shoes.
He has a real fixation on her shoes. I noticed that multiple times. He keeps calling her shoes cheap, and it's like, what are you, fashion snob, Dr. Hannibal Lecter? Like, she's just a student. How dare you?
But he's this refined man, this refined murderer. It's very good, the way he toys with her and withholds things. And I know this is speaking more to the script writing, but Anthony Hopkins' performance in it is just...
It's phenomenal.
I cannot get over that he's only in 20 minutes of this movie. And you almost forget the fact that there are two serial killers in this movie. So there's Hannibal Lecter, who spends most of the movie behind bars in high security. And then there's Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter's the serial killer we're cheering for in this movie, ultimately. The good guy serial killer.
Yeah, not the villain. He's the helper.
He's the helper character.
Yeah. But the villain of Buffalo Bill, the other serial killer, he is sinister. He's like totally fucked up. He is out there at large, but for some reason he is scary, but he is not nearly as scary as the guy in high security prison. And I almost forget that there's two killers in this movie because you're just so fixated on Anthony Hopkins' character.
Well, let's talk about Buffalo Bill.
Let's do
played
it.
By Ted Levine, who I feel like poor Ted Levine, because he did such a good job being Buffalo Bill that he'll never live this down. He pops up in Monk. He pops up in Shutter Island. He's in all sorts of TV shows and movies. And the second you hear that voice, you're immediately channeled back to, oh God, it's Buffalo Bill. Like, you can't unsee or unhear Ted Levine.
Yeah, he plays a good villain and a good serial killer. I mean, it almost pales in comparison to Anthony Hopkins' character, but it's still good. It's still terrifying. The scene where he abducts the character who, Catherine, I think.
Catherine Martin, yeah.
I mean, he doesn't look threatening. He's skinny. He has a cast on, and he sort of cajoles her into the van and, abduct her. And in a weird, that's terrifying. And I will never, to this day, cannot hear Tom Petty's American Girl song without thinking of this movie.
Oh no.
I don't even listen to it if it comes on in the car. I think one time I was on a road, I was driving somewhere and it was late at night and it just came on the radio and I immediately turned it off because I was like, it's at night, I'm alone, I cannot listen to this song because that's the whole...
Don't help any strangers move any furniture at all.
I should back up to say that song is playing where Catherine, the character, is singing along to it in the car, and then the song just sort of is this weird poppy soundtrack to her getting abducted by Buffalo Bill. Cannot separate that from the actual song to this day. All that to say is that he is a bad guy, but for some reason he's not as bad as Anthony Hopkins.
He's worse because he's more chaotic, but he also doesn't get as much screen time because they're like trying to figure out who he is and where he is.
But fantastic performance. Still, like, again, this is the movie that made serial killers like intriguing in a way.
I'm so sad he did not get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for this. That is an abomination to me.
When he's dancing around naked,
we all know the scene we're referring to.
I was very confused by that as a kid.
I was too, because it was just like, wait, what am I looking at?
Yeah, I was very confused as like a 12-year-old. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And just so folks know, just to remind folks who haven't seen it in a while, you probably remember this, but you have the background of Catherine who's in like the dungeon in the basement, like screaming basically.
She's literally down a well in his basement.
It's so fucked up. And you have the dog barking, you have her screaming, and he's just like has the music up in his room. And he's basically naked and he's putting on makeup and he's kind of wearing some of like the skin from the women he's
got
killed.
A video cast, like he's got a video camera. He's like the original influencer trying to be like, everyone look at me.
Right. But he's dancing.
And this was based on a recording that an actual serial killer did.
Really?
Where it was like, let me record myself like being a hotshot and saying what I'm about to do. Like that's where that came from. So it's super creepy, but Ted Levine as the actor is bringing a whole nother level to this because he thought through like, all right, this is what the character would do here. Like none of that's in the book.
And so you see a close-up of him like doing his makeup and sort of starts to dance, and the further he gets in the camera, you could see, then you realize he's like naked essentially, and he like does the tuck. He
tucks his genitals between his legs.
Yes, he does.
You just see the pubic hair, and that's all Ted Levine going full Monty right there.
Full Monty, but like a hidden Monty. I was confused by that as a kid. I just don't think I knew what to think as a 12-year-old watching, because I didn't understand any of the whole idea of transformation or like sexuality at that point at this level. Also with like a serial killer involved. I mean, it was over my head.
Another reason why children should not be watching this movie, because there's no way for them to interpret this.
Yeah. This is like reason probably honestly towards the bottom of the list why they shouldn't be watching this movie, but it's still one of the reasons.
So this is the moment where Justice has listened to me say this a million times, but I need to tell my Ted Levine story.
Yes.
Because I worked on Shutter Island, which is a 2008 movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio, but also Ted Levine playing the prison warden, and he is friggin' phenomenal in this movie. I really recommend everyone go see it and then try to like kick Buffalo Bill out of your mind, even though you never possibly could.
You really can't.
He's very good in Shutter Island. But as he was added to the cast and then it was announced, okay, he's going to be here on this specific day, it wasn't quite a written memo, but it came down from our bosses that if anyone was heard saying the phrase, put the lotion in the basket anywhere near Ted Levine, you would be fired on the spot. That this poor man has endured so many people coming up to him asking him to say, put the lotion in the basket. I gotta imagine he regrets that line was in the movie.
He's so good
because
at
it's an
that
iconic line. It's so scary and it's so weird and iconic.
Wait, did anyone do it?
Oh God, no.
You guys were all too terrified to do it in front of him? Or did you do it behind his back?
We did behind his back.
Of course you did.
Because there was a running joke with the accounting department. Like, we'd hand in the time cards with, like, a small sample bottle of lotion. Like, there's some lotion in your in basket. Just saying.
Oh, my God.
But not really saying. We didn't actually say anything because we were told not to say anything. But, like, I feel so strongly for Ted Levine, who took an amazing role, and he was such a star at this. But it's really defined his whole career. Like, rewatching it now, there's the scene at the end where Clarice stumbles upon Buffalo Bill's house and, like, they're having a conversation in the kitchen. But she figures out who he is, pulls her gun, tells him to put his hands up, and he's holding a bunch of business cards. And the way he just kind of crumples them into the air before he turns and runs is so psychotic, and I love it. The second he just makes that motion of throwing the card, it's not throwing, it's just like, fuck it.
Yeah,
I'm just releasing all of these things.
It's so funny you point that out because
Goodbye.
he has like this motion of like a dancer that sort of looks like the earlier scene when he was doing the tucking. But that still, and I knew this scene was coming. I mean, I've seen this movie like dozens of times.
And then,
And I still, when that butterfly or the moth lands on the thread and Clarice sees it, and then all of a sudden, like, you could see it in her face that she realizes, oh, holy shit, this is Buffalo Bill. And for folks who don't remember, Clarice's character at this point is just following the lead, basically that Hannibal Lecter sent her on, to go, we covet what we see, meaning go look in the hometown of the first victim and start following those leads. So she's really just
and she's already identified the moths, and she's already identified that this serial killer can sew. And she sees a moth land on thread, and she's like, oh.
But she's right.
Shoot.
But at this point in the plot, her boss is flying to where he thinks the real killer is, somewhere far further away.
Yeah, they're on this red herring mission.
Right, because Hannibal Lecter sent them on this red herring mission. This is what really sinks in. The first time I saw this movie, maybe the first couple times you see it, you really don't expect Clarice to be at the door when Buffalo Bill opens
You
it.
really don't.
You don't.
Even though it makes no sense for the FBI to just randomly catch this guy while she's off chasing clues, it just blows your mind.
It blows your
opens
mind.
The door, and it's like, Clarice, oh, shoot, she's in trouble.
So she's sort of suspicious, but the moth then lands on the thread.
And he invites her in, and he's like plying her for details about, like, what do you know about the serial killer? And then he runs.
And
he's got a gun, and she's chasing him. And this is, you always raise the lack of cell phones in the 1980s and 1990s.
Always part of the plot.
Would have solved so many movies. So she's really on her own without any cell phone. And she's going down into this basement maze with no backup, no cell phone, like such isolation. Huh. So creepy.
mean, I'm getting anxious just talking about it, and this is where the lack of cell phones, it doesn't even matter. Like, I really do think this movie could come out today exactly as is. They could have cell phones and the scene could still work.
This is really one-on-one, all the stakes, because nobody knows where she is right now. Nobody's coming. If he just shoots her, nobody's ever going to find her.
Yeah.
And it strikes me the most when she comes across the pit where Catherine Martin's being trapped, and they're talking to each other.
I actually thought this scene was slightly funny because Catherine calls her a fucking bitch.
She does, which, to be fair, if you'd been down there a few days and someone's like, I'm here to help you, but I gotta go for a few minutes. Oh, yeah, I would swear at her, too.
It's like small comic relief in a really intense scene. Like probably one of the most intense scenes I have ever seen on screen. But it's like this tiny little comic relief where Catherine just calls her a bitch. It's so funny to me.
So this scene, they go down, they're in Buffalo Bill's basement. The night vision goggle scene, they shot that in 22 hours, which sounds really? Like in one day. Like they just kept take after take after take after take. Like that just grinds you down. The longest shoot I ever was on was coincidentally for Shutter Island, we did a 23-hour day one time, and I just remember being delirious by the end of that. I think someone in the crew got in the car accident on the way home. Like, you're just off your head after that amount of time awake, and like the intensity of shooting this scene, I can't imagine.
When Buffalo Bill's character reaches out with the night vision and you could see his hand just go right above her face. Generally speaking, even if your eyes close and somebody puts their hand near your face, you can kind of sense it. You could see Clarice sense it, that he's right there. And just like the sheer terror on her face is really palpable. Like, she knows that he's right there. She can sense him. That, as a kid, when I would watch it, even though I had seen it multiple times, and it was like, whether it's my 6th or 10th viewing as a kid, I don't know why I watched this so much. That scene got me every time.
You psycho.
I'm a psycho. Or just really like Jodie Foster. I don't know. But that scene really got me every time, because it's just so... Because you could relate to it. You know what that feels like when you could kind of like, you're like waking up or something and you kind of sense something.
Feeling of there's something there.
There's something there. Oh. Like if your cat or dog is like, staring at you to feed them, like you could sense it. So it's like there's something relatable about it. There's something there. Oh, and the scene was just as effective. I knew it was coming. It didn't feel too short or too long again. It was, it still was so effective.
They shoot it so slowly and deliberately.
I don't watch a lot of horror movies or scary movies. It's not really my genre. I think this is literally the most intense scene to me that I've ever seen on screen, because it's such a slow burn. I mean, because it's not too fast, but it's not too slow either. They're showing how she's like a novice, like she's shaking and she like the gun is wobbling. She's breathing really heavily.
Yeah, 22 hours of that. Like, I'm surprised they didn't have to like send her for like a health check after this.
But it's so effective. It's so effective. You really think she's gonna get it, because who knows, in this movie main characters could die. I mean, you really think she's a goner.
I think with worse movies, we're conditioned to wait for a jump scare or some stupid thing to like just fly in front of the screen, and they don't do that at all.
Or more choreographed fighting. I mean, there's none of that.
Yeah, they just build it and build it and build it. And the tension is so palpable.
Yeah, it's really just as effective.
All right, we should give a quick nod to some of the other actors and characters in this movie. We talked a little bit about Dr. Frederick Chilton, who is the real bad guy here.
He really is.
Not really. He doesn't kill anybody. He's just like an egomaniac, and he sucks. But boy, does he get it.
He does.
We think. We don't see it, but...
Again, this is where this movie's great. You don't see it, but, it's indicated at the end when Hannibal Lecter calls Clarice and says, I'm having an old friend for dinner. And then you see that Anthony Hopkins is watching Dr. Chilton come off a cruise ship, and you're like, yep, he's going to get it.
So, the original screenplay had a different ending, and this ending to me is perfect the way it is right now. But
one of the top 3 endings in a movie ever, I think.
I'm not totally clear who changed the ending, but originally Dr. Lecter calls Clarice at her graduation ceremony, which he currently does, and he's slowly peeling an orange during the whole discussion, but he's like in a room somewhere, and you just see him focus on his hands peeling an orange while he's talking to her. And then he hangs up the phone, and he's sitting across from Dr. Chilton and has a line like, "Let's begin," and it's implied he's about to torture Chilton to death.
That would be pretty good, too.
Which is super creepy. And, like, there's an element of he's peeling an orange, and we've just seen this whole movie about, like, skinning people. Yeah. And, like, it's a kind of a throwback, callback. But I like it so much better the way it actually ended, because you see Chilton, who is, like, how do you make yourself the nemesis of Dr. Lecter? Like, you're such a jerk. You're such a douchebag that, like... You have a nemesis of a cannibal serial killer. Like,
there's 2 serial killers in this movie. There's 2, but he's the villain.
He's somehow the worst person in this movie. Shout out to Catherine Martin's actress, which is Brooke Smith. She has to spend this whole movie pretty much down a well yelling profanity. She had to gain 25 pounds to play this character because Buffalo Bill only kills plus-size women.
Yeah.
So she had this phenomenal quote in an article I read. She said, I was in an acting class with Vincent D'Onofrio, friend of our podcast,
yes,
because he was in Adventures in Babysitting. So she said, I was in an acting class with Vincent D'Onofrio when I got the role, and he had just done Full Metal Jacket. So he said, you got to ask the producers to give you a credit card. They got to pay for your food. So I did, and we always joked that's why this movie went over budget, because of my food. And also Jodie Foster nicknamed Brooke Smith Patty Hearst while they were filming, because after they rapped every day, she and Ted Levine would like go hang out and like go for drinks and shit.
That is so weird.
You don't know who they are until the movie comes out, but if you'd been out at like a bar and seen Buffalo Bill and Catherine Martin like sitting there like
just like having
glasses,
a beer. Oh my God.
Like, hey, yeah, like that the two of them were buddies and got on really well.
That is so weird.
So creepy to think about.
That's like the weirdest fact I think we've ever had on this podcast. That's so weird. Oh God. And we've talked about furries. I mean, that's
yes. And then the final appearance I want to call out is second appearance on the Live Up podcast, Darla the dog.
Wait, what was she the dog in? Was she in?
She was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Oh, that's right. She was in Pee-wee.
Yes.
I love that the
and
dog
here
is
she
in
is
it.
again. She's playing Precious. Oh, Precious.
Oh my God.
We'll have to watch her whole filmography because we're big fans of Darla the dog on this podcast.
Darla does a great job of being the dog of a serial killer.
She gets to live at the end, and it seems like Catherine Martin takes her home.
I know.
Possibly.
Again, tiny comic relief is that when she's escorted out, once everybody's rescued, Buffalo Bill's dead, the FBI shows up. When Catherine Martin her character is led out of the house, she's basically still clutching Darla the dog. Or not Darla. Oh my God.
Or
Precious. The dog.
But it's literally Darla, but
it's literally Darla Precious. And I think at some point some FBI guy tries to take the dog from her, and she's just like, no. And she just like keeps the dog. And it gets like this tiny little comic relief in an incredibly intense movie.
So traditionally on this podcast, we call out things that are cringy or suck. Anything cringy you want to call out?
I keep saying I think this movie could come out tomorrow and it won't feel dated or cringy. I think it's timeless. I think there's an argument to be made about some of the transsexual stuff that maybe that could be cringy, but I don't think so because it's in the context of the serial killer. It's not being anti-trans or any of that. There is absolutely no social commentary on anyone in the queer spectrum at all. I don't think anything's cringy here.
I think the problem you're highlighting is that I think people falsely connected the image and personification of Buffalo Bill with the trans community after this movie came out.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And that is not what this character is. To the point that Dr. Lecter blatantly says he's not trans at one point.
That's right. I found that interesting.
I will say, like, Jonathan Demme got a lot of critique on this for directing a movie this way, and he was saying like he's not trans, but then eventually was like, I understand there are not enough positive portrayal of gay and trans people in movies right now, and so I take your point that this, even though this is not a trans character, there should be more positive trans and gay portrayals. And then he went on to direct Philadelphia like as his next movie. So
I think we could transition from cringy, which there really isn't. I think we agree that movie doesn't get knocked for cringy, and I
think it gets knocked for like people reacted in a cringy manner, but I don't think the movie itself is actually that cringy.
Right. We could talk about the great things. I think this movie just hit so many marks in subtlety of even we were talking about for being ahead of its time in portraying a woman in a man's world. It was subtle. I would not call it woke or any of that stuff. There's not a lot of action. You don't see the actual murdering act, but yet it is still terrifying. There are so many great things, and I do put the ending of this movie as the best ending. One of the best, most satisfying in a weird way endings of any movie.
Satisfying, even though somebody's about to get killed,
but it's so good. It's so satisfying. This has to be in like the top 3, and I think Shawshank is up there as one of the top satisfying endings.
Yeah.
This is a great satisfying ending, and it also had two of the most intense scenes, the escape scene from Hannibal Lecter and the scene of two different locations with the houses with Clarice and Crawford, that were just the most intense thing I've ever seen on film. So those things were great.
Yeah, no, this movie does almost everything perfectly. The cinematography is stunning. Like, it's so bleak, and that's exactly what it needs to be. All of those slow searching through the basement scenes.
It's like painful how slow it is.
It's beautiful. I just, in the like margins of my notes, have, I love this. This is so good, even though it's the most terrifying, creepy thing I could possibly be watching on a sunny Sunday afternoon. The editing also, like, kudos. You built up so much suspense. There's so many scenes where Dr. Lecter is just staring directly in the camera. They're just holding the gaze on his face, and you just can't get away from it.
I can't tear myself
shuddering,
away.
like, oh, stop staring at me, man. Like, that's such a beautiful artistic decision. I love it. Yeah. It's so creepy.
I was planning on watching this movie over the course of 2 nights just because of like various schedules. And it was late because it was late when I started watching it, and I just kept going. I couldn't turn it off.
Can't leave Clarice hanging there midway.
Could not.
Viewing of this.
Yeah, I actually didn't expect the intensity to still feel intense, even though I've seen this movie so many times. So that says a lot. So as we talked about earlier in the podcast, we are going to score this in the same way. We're going to move on to rating. We're just with slightly different considerations. Obviously, this was a good movie. It wasn't a movie that could have possibly been in question to not be, but we're still going to score it as one that we shouldn't have been watching. So first rating, 1 to 10, 1 being garbage. 10 is usually Princess Bride, but we could say, or insert any good movie here. So what do you got for, this rating is for adults. Does it live up to you?
This is for adults.
Yeah. Does it live up to you as an adult?
I might have to give my first ever 10 for an adult. Yeah.
It's perfect.
This was flawless. Rewatching this as an adult, even though I'd seen it that one time when I was 12, but then I saw it a few times in between and showed it to my 4-year-old sister, that it was better watching it now as an adult. I just picked up on more of the artistry and the references and just how the conversation between Clarice and Dr. Lecter was so captivating. It made so much more sense to me as an adult and was so much more terrifying for that. So this was a fantastic. Yeah, I got to give this a 10 for adults. It's perfect.
So I agree. I'm also going to give it a 10. That has to be our first 20 for a category. And
that's definitely a consensus that we've never had before.
Yeah.
You and I don't agree.
So folks, we're not going to count this in the average for our regular movies, because this is in a category of, typically as kids, we weren't watching Oscar movies that were rated R and incredibly violent.
Also, these After Dark episodes are not for children, so we need to pluck this out. This is not like Disney's Robin Hood, and this is not like a Muppet
That would
movie.
be a good chaser.
This is a separate.
It's a good chaser. So the next scoring is a little tricky. Is rating 1 to 10, same scale, but would it live up to kids today or its intended audience? Obviously, for this particular one, the intended audience was specifically not kids. But that is how we consumed it and watched it. So I'm going to rate this as imagining whether it's a tween stumbling upon this movie when they weren't supposed to, or I'd even extend it all the way up to like a younger person, like early 20s, who had maybe never heard of this movie and watched it for the first time. And, would this still live up to them? But what do you think, Amanda, for your score here?
So it's hard. I'm not recommending any kid watch this ever, but based on our criteria, I'm actually going to lean into the fact that the British rating system eventually knocked this down from an 18 plus movie to a 15 plus movie. So let's picture a 15-year-old watching it today. I think I want to give it an 8. I think with modern day sensibilities that the sexism she's encountering would not be as seen as much as a character development tool for Clarice, and would just be seen as, the patriarchy holding her down, and possibly even a little cliche at this point.
Here, I disagree with you slightly.
I'm not sure here.
I think that I think it actually captures really well, and this is what I loved watching it as an adult, is that I think it captures well how to navigate through the world as a woman. I know this is not the point of this movie, but she's
flawless at navigating.
But I do think this still happens.
Don't know.
Maybe it's not at the FBI. Maybe not the literal. I'm in an elevator with all these beefy, broad-shouldered men in a physical job, right? But I do think there's something that still feels relevant to this year of 2023. So I actually think if you're going, listen, for a 12-year-old, this would scare the fucking shit out of them the way it scared the fucking shit out of us. I'm going to give it as high as a 9 because I felt like even, God forbid, your 12-year-old watches this movie by accident, they are not going to turn this off. It is too captivating. It's too well done. And I'm pretty confident in that. And I think a teenager would be okay with this. Also, Jodie Foster just still presents as so gay that I find that really fun. So I give this a 9 for my kid rating for Silence of the Lambs.
Okay. Jess has a crush on Jodie Foster.
Yeah, I feel like I bumped it up for
9.
that.
Yeah.
So total, we have
37.
37 out of a possible 40.
That's the highest thing we've ever rated any movie, and it stands outside of our kids' movie ratings.
So the last question, just to remind folks, we have to agree. The last question is, does this movie live up? I think we know where we're going. You say it.
Of course
it does.
It's immaculate.
And I don't think that every movie in this category of really dark shit that we should not have been watching as 11 and 12-year-olds, it's not always going to meet this bar. I think this would be a very, very high bar to clear for this category of movies, but it'll be interesting as we go on in the podcast to see how other movies, after dark movies, kind of compare to this one.
It's going to be a tough competition. I do want to call out, too, so we just ranked this 37 points total. Beauty and the Beast is our highest rated kids movie at 31. So which one won Best Picture?
Interesting. And they're both 1991. Maybe we need to, oh my God.
1991 Best Picture nominees, but Silence of the Lambs ultimately won.
Wow.
I think 11-year-old me is finally going to have to get over that.
I think you do. Our next movie that we're going to be reviewing is also from 1991. So this is a mini theme, an unintended theme here of 1991 movies. Yes. But this will be clear in a way the best one.
Yes.
Yeah. For those listening who might disagree, let us know what you think at LiveUpPod on all the socials or at LiveUpPod at Gmail. Thanks for listening, everybody.